Thanks for being with us for this Riz Extra. We're speaking with Richard Falk, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories, about the current war on Gaza. Professor, good to have you with us, and I wonder if you could answer, from your opinion, a question a lot of people are asking: is Israel committing war crimes in Gaza, and should there be a UN-sanctioned investigation put into place? How would it happen if there was one?
Well, let me answer the second part of the question first. I think there should definitely be an investigation leading to the establishment of some kind of judicial mechanism. And this is what would happen if the UN was able to function in the manner that its charter and international criminal law envisioned back in 1945. Unfortunately, the political realities are such that I think it highly unlikely that such an investigation, much less a mechanism for imposing individual criminal responsibility, will be established, however clearly the violations of the laws of war and the war crimes have been established at this point. And as for whether the Israeli attacks constitute war crimes, that's a question that can only be raised in a kind of impressionistic way without some sort of assessment of the intentions behind these tactics. And that would require an investigation and some sort of confirmation of the facts and the relevance of those facts to applicable law. But I'm quite confident that an objective investigation would reach the conclusion that the government of Israel and those that act on its behalf are indeed responsible for a pattern of violation that constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Professor, should the United Nations be more proactive, perhaps even more aggressive in its dealings with the conflict in order to safeguard human rights there in terms of, particularly in the territories?
I think the United Nations is hampered by the degree to which it can do no more or less than what its most powerful members seek it to do. In other words, its capacities are constrained by geopolitics, and in this situation that now is confronting us, the role of the United States and to some extent the European powers as well do not want the UN to do anything that seriously interferes with the Israeli policies that are being pursued. And it should not be understood as a failure so much of the UN as a failure or a willing complicity in this pattern of behavior by the most important members of the United Nations. It also should be understood that there are many heroic UN civil servants on the ground in Gaza and also to some extent in Jerusalem and the West Bank who are taking great personal risks in order to do what can be done to provide the population of Gaza with food, medicine, and other necessities. And it also needs to be understood, finally, that the UN, even if it can't act to stop this horrible military campaign, is an important site of struggle in the legitimacy war for the hearts and minds of world public opinion. And that's a war that the Palestinians are beginning to win, just as the opponents of apartheid began to win that war in the late 1980s and early 1990s.
Of course, Professor, Israel has largely resisted third-party intervention, particularly the UN being there on the ground. But I wonder, do you ever see a time when UN forces might actually be able to go in as a peacekeeping force to safeguard human rights on both sides of the conflict?
Well, I think that would certainly be desirable from a humanitarian point of view and would be consistent with the UN role, but that won't happen as long as the United States reinforces Israel's refusal to allow a protective presence within the Palestinian territories, or even a protective presence that would insulate them from rocket and other attacks that might imperil security in Israel.
How hopeful are you the situation might change under Barack Obama when he's in the White House?
I think that there is some hope that the Obama administration will exert humanitarian pressure on Israel so that the worst excesses of the kind of policies we've seen in Lebanon in 2006 and now in Gaza will not recur in the future. But I don't see any fundamental movement away from this posture of unconditional support for Israel and a refusal to acknowledge the injustice of the policies being imposed by Israel as the occupying power on both Gaza and the West Bank.
With the US, the American public in general, receiving very little information out of the region, how easy will it be to obtain that legitimacy that you referred to, that the Palestinians need for some kind of change among the American public? What will it take for the US to change its priorities? Because that must certainly hinder you as a UN representative.
Yes, it certainly is an obstacle to being an effective UN representative. As I say, the situation is changing in a subtle way here in the United States. There is more sympathy for the Palestinian plight. There is more criticism of the way in which Israel has been using its military forces. There is a change in the climate of opinion. Whether that change transforms the attitudes toward the conflict on the part of the Obama administration is hard to tell. Congress has just passed extremely one-sided resolutions supporting Israel in this Gaza campaign, and that's a sad commentary on how far out of touch the U.S. Congress is with both world public opinion and the requirements of international law and morality.
Professor Richard Falk, thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Watching Professor Richard Falk there, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for the Palestinian occupied territories. Thanks very much for watching this Riz Extra. We'll see you next time.